In our digital world, pretty much everything we do, every click, every purchase, every single piece of data, it all lives under this constant shadow of a potential threat. So, how do the world's biggest companies actually deal with this danger? It's not just about firewalls. It's this high stakes game of rules, risk, and, well, reality. So, take a look at this number 1.2 billion euros. What do you think that is? I mean, is it a company's valuation, a small country's GDP? Nope, it's something way more immediate and painful. That's the price tag for one single massive data privacy mistake. It's a huge reminder that in the world of cyber risk, the consequences are very, very real. So how do you even start to understand and manage a threat that big? Okay, let's get into it. First things first, it all starts with defining the problem. We've got to get a handle on what cyber risk actually means from a business perspective. So at its core, cyber risk is really just the potential damage from any kind of digital event, and it's calculated with a pretty simple formula. You take the likelihood of something bad happening, and you multiply it by the impact it would have if it actually did. It's a surprisingly powerful way to turn these vague fears into a problem you can actually measure. And what I love about this slide is how it breaks risk down into three really clear parts. First up, you've got the threat. That's the what, like a ransomware attack. Then you've got the vulnerability. That's the how, like an unpatched operating system that leaves the door open. And finally, the impact, which is the so what, right? We're talking massive financial loss, huge legal fines, the works. Okay, so when you're faced with all these dangers, you can't just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Organizations need a strategy, a real playbook for how to fight back. And the absolute gold standard for that playbook comes from NIST. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Their risk management framework, or RMF for short, is the structured approach that governments and all the top companies use to protect their most important systems. And this framework isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous six-step cycle. You start by categorizing your systems, figuring out how sensitive they are. Then you select and implement the right security controls. You assess them to make sure they work. Then you authorize the system to go live, but it doesn't stop there. The last step, and honestly the most important, is to just continuously monitor everything. And this quote right here, it just nails it. Security isn't some project you finish. It is not a checklist you can just tick off and then forget about. It is a constant, ongoing cycle of being vigilant. Now, managing all this risk isn't just a good idea, it's the law. And failing to comply with this complex web of global regulations, it carries a staggering cost. I mean, just look at this landscape. You've got GDPR in Europe for data privacy, the DPDPA in India with similar goals, HIPAA in the US protecting health data, and PCI DSS locking down financial data all over the world. Each one has different rules, different regions, and some serious teeth. And the penalties? They are severe. Under GDPR, a company can get fined up to 4% of its entire global turnover. Meanwhile, India's new DDPA can hit you with a penalty of 250 crore rupees. That's about $30 million for each violation. So the takeaway here is the financial stakes are just enormous. Hey, remember that number from the beginning? Here it is again. Meta got slammed with that record-breaking 1.2 billion euro fine because they violated GDPR's rules about data residency, specifically for moving European user data over to US servers without the right legal protections in place. And get this wasn't a hack, it was a compliance failure. And the consequences aren't always just about money. Take this fintech startup, for example. They failed to meet the PCI DSS standards for protecting credit card data. And the result? They got kicked off the Visa and MasterCard networks. For a payments company, that's basically a death sentence. Which brings us to this really critical lesson. For a lot of businesses, especially in places like finance or healthcare, compliance isn't just about protecting your reputation. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable requirement for survival. Okay, so we get the risks and we get the rules, but how does all this stuff translate into the day-to-day work for, say, a cybersecurity analyst? What does turning all this theory into action actually look like? Well, the answer starts with this really foundational tool called a risk register. You can think of it as the bridge that connects that abstract world of risk frameworks and regulations to the actual concrete actions you need to take to protect an organization. And here's what a simple one looks like. An analyst flags a specific risk, like a phishing attack. Then they assign it a likelihood, in this case high, and an impact, let's say medium. And then, most importantly, they define the specific mitigation controls, things like implementing multi-factor authentication, that extra security code you get on your phone, and using smarter email filtering. But look, a giant spreadsheet full of data isn't going to cut it for a busy executive. So, the really crucial next step is to translate that whole register into a clear visual dashboard that paints a compelling picture for the people in charge. And you can see exactly how that data just comes to life. A simple chart like this one instantly shows a CEO the proportion of high, medium, and low impact risks the company is dealing with. It just cuts right through the noise and focuses everyone's attention exactly where it needs to be. So we've covered the what, the why, and the how of cyber risk and compliance, but all of this, it leads to a much bigger, almost philosophical question about the future. As all these privacy laws get stricter and the penalties get higher, you have to wonder, does this mountain of rules end up slowing down innovation and creativity? Or, by forcing companies to build more secure, more thoughtful products right from the start, does it actually make innovation safer and better for all of us? It's a real tension at the heart of our digital future. What do you think?